You're just some guy in a dusty house." The words fell like ice water on the linen tablecloth. Chloe's voice was light, playful to anyone listening, but the edge beneath it was sharp. Walter Dean sat motionless at the head of the table, the antique oak chair creaking softly beneath his weight. For a moment, no one moved. Diane, poised in her silk blouse and pearls, lifted her wineglass with a smirk. Ethan, seated beside Chloe, stared down at his plate of untouched roast chicken, the muscles in his jaw twitching. Walter's eyes didn't leave Chloe. She was beautiful. He could admit that. Blonde, poised, everything society seemed to reward. But her eyes, sharp and mocking, held nothing warm. They scanned him like he was a character in a book she'd already finished and decided wasn't worth rereading. The room was too warm, filled with the scent of rosemary and lamb, a playlist of soft jazz humming in the background. Walter's fork paused in midair, mashed potatoes slipping off as gravity pulled the moment into silence. Chloe gave a delicate laugh, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "No offense, Walter. I just mean, Ethan never really told me what you do or did. He said you used to work in finance or something, wore suits, had an office, that kind of thing." Her nails, manicured in pale pink, drummed against her wineglass. Diane chuckled softly. "Well, not everyone keeps up with the pace of the world. Some people fade gracefully into the background." Walter's hand gripped the handle of his fork just a little tighter. His knuckles blanched. He glanced at Ethan. His son didn't look up. That stung more than Chloe's words. Walter could have brushed off the insult if his son had even flinched, said something, looked at him. But Ethan just sat there, shoulders hunched, eyes locked on a speck of sauce on his plate. For years, Walter had lived in that dusty house, not because he had nowhere else to be, but because it held echoes of his wife, Maggie. It was where Ethan had grown up, learned to ride a bike on the front sidewalk, where Walter had read bedtime stories until his voice went hoarse. Dusty? Maybe. But it was full of the kind of life Chloe clearly had no use for. Walter placed his fork down gently. The soft clink of metal on ceramic echoed in the space between them. Diane sipped her wine, eyes dancing over the rim of her glass, waiting for a reaction. Chloe looked amused, as if daring him to speak. He didn't. Not yet. He pushed his chair back slowly, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor. The sound felt louder than it should have, but no one moved. He rose to his feet, buttoning his blazer with calm, practiced fingers. "Excuse me," he said, voice low and steady. "I think I'll get some air." No one stopped him. No one even offered a word. As he stepped out of the dining room, the atmosphere shifted. The hallway was dim, cooler than the candle-lit space he had just left. On the wall, a large black and white photo hung in a brass frame. Walter paused in front of it. Maggie stood in the center, one arm around a younger Ethan, the other around Walter. Their smiles were genuine, unposed. He reached out, brushing a finger over Maggie's face. "You'd have had a word or two for her," he whispered. From the dining room, the faint sound of laughter resumed, forced, brittle. Probably Diane trying to re-steer the conversation. He moved down the hall toward his study. The door creaked as he opened it, the hinges complaining from lack of oil. The room smelled of old leather, paper, and time. It was a sanctuary, one untouched by the world Chloe came from. The desk sat in the corner, heavy and reliable. On it, a picture of Maggie and Ethan when he was 8, grinning with a missing front tooth. Walter stared at it for a long beat before reaching for the drawer. The bottom one. It stuck slightly. He hadn't opened it in months, but gave way with a soft tug. Inside lay a battered leather-bound address book. Faded. Familiar. He picked it up, weighing it in his hands. The edges were worn, and the spine had a crack down the middle. It still smelled like ambition and late nights. He flipped through the pages until he landed on one name, Raymond Boyd, the man who once called Walter the most focused strategist in Seattle. Walter smiled, not a smug one, a small, knowing one, the kind that crept in when the truth reasserted itself after being silenced too long. He set the book on the desk, sat in his chair, and stared at the name. The last time he'd spoken to Raymond was, years ago, a different life. When he wore suits, yes. When he made decisions that shaped entire firms, and when he walked away from it all because Maggie needed him, because Ethan needed him. He had never explained that to Ethan. And and maybe that was his fault. A breeze moved through the open window, rustling a page in the address book. Walter leaned back, the leather chair creaking under his weight. The flickering desk lamp cast soft shadows, golden and gentle. He wasn't angry. He was done being angry. There was something cleaner in what he felt now. Not revenge, not pride, just clarity. Let them laugh. Let Diane sip her wine and Chloe twirl her diamond ring and Ethan avert his eyes. They would learn soon enough. He stood and walked back to the hallway, pausing in front of the family photo once more. Maggie's smile was as steady as ever. "I think it's time, Mags," he said quietly. "I think I'm ready." The dining room had gone quiet again. The jazz playlist looped back to the same mellow saxophone tune. Walter stepped to the coat rack, took down his jacket, and slipped the address book into the inside pocket. Behind him, the house stood still. The game, as they say, had just begun. Walter didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study, the address book open on his desk, a mug of lukewarm coffee by his elbow, untouched. Outside, the Seattle rain tapped gently against the windows, steady, rhythmic, like it had all the time in the world. Inside, the only sound was the slow creak of the leather chair as he shifted, eyes fixed on the name he hadn't said aloud in over a decade. Raymond Boyd. He remembered the first time he'd met Ray, 1989, at a finance summit at the Columbia Tower. Walter had been the youngest director in the room, and Ray had walked over with 2 bourbons in hand and said, "You look like someone who sees 10 moves ahead." They'd built a career and a quiet loyalty on that single observation. He picked up the phone. The old landline, still plugged in despite being rarely used, let out a soft tone as he dialed. Each number clicked under his fingers with intention. It rang twice. Then a gruff voice answered, "Boyd?" Walter smiled faintly. "Ray, it's Walter Dean." A pause, then a low, familiar chuckle. Well, thought you were off the grid, my friend. You still breathing up there in Queen Anne?" "Barely," Walter said, leaning back. "I need to talk. In person." That sobered the voice. "What's going on?" "I think I'm walking back into a game I left too early," Walter replied, "and I could use your eyes." There was another pause, then a sigh. "Come by tomorrow." "Same place? Still sipping rye at Lakeview Tavern?" "Always? Noon?" "Noon." Walter hung up, setting the receiver down with care. He exhaled, not quite relief, but something close. The kind of breath you take when a gear finally clicks into place after years of rust. He stared at the address book again, then reached into the drawer for an old yellowed envelope. Inside was a photo, one he hadn't touched in years. Maggie and Ethan seated on a park bench, Maggie's hair blown back by the wind, Ethan mid-laugh, missing a front tooth. Walter had taken the photo. He'd carried it in his wallet for years before tucking it away after the funeral. He set it on the desk. The clock ticked past 1:00 a.m., and so he began to remember. 1995, back when he walked into the mirrored halls of Cascade Equity each morning like he owned the place, which in a way he nearly did. His name wasn't on the building, but his strategies were on every project plan, every boardroom pitch, suits, ties, power lunches. He had a corner office with a view of the sound and a team that moved when he spoke. But that fall, Maggie's cough had deepened. It started as something minor, then lingered. Then came the fatigue, the endless appointments, the tests, and then the words no one wants to hear. He was offered a partnership that week, a promotion, equity shares, everything he'd worked toward. Harold Winters, his mentor, had stood in his office doorway, tie askew, holding a thick folder. "You ready to sit at the big table?" Harold had asked, eyes gleaming. Walter had looked down at the papers, then passed them to the picture on his desk. Maggie, just last summer, grinning on the Oregon coast. Her cheeks still full, her eyes still bright. "I need to go home," he'd said. Harold blinked, confused. "You mean for the day?" "No," Walter replied. "I need to be home. Period." Harold had said nothing, just nodded once, slowly. "You're a better man than I am, Dean." Walter never opened the folder. Now, decades later, He wondered if Ethan ever truly knew. He'd been 15 at the time, too young to understand what it meant to step away from the top of the mountain. Then came 2006, Ethan's private school years. Walter took bookkeeping jobs, consulting gigs, things that paid just enough. He remembered writing the tuition check with cramped fingers after 4 hours of tutoring calculus to college freshmen. Ethan had walked through the kitchen, grabbed an apple, mumbled, "Thanks, Dad," and vanished out the door. And he'd smiled. Because that's what fathers did. But maybe, just maybe, he'd made it too easy to be forgotten. The following morning, the rain had stopped, replaced by a pale, cloud-covered sky. Walter dressed simply. Charcoal sweater, navy jacket, and drove down to Lakeview. The tavern hadn't changed since the 90s, still smelled faintly of varnish and rye, still played jazz low in the background. He walked in and spotted Ray in the back booth, same table they'd sealed a dozen deals over. Ray stood, older now, heavier, but his handshake was still iron. "You look good for a ghost," Ray said. Walter slid into the booth. "I've been waiting for the right time to haunt someone." Ray chuckled. "Well, what's got you back from the dead?" Walter paused, folding his hands. "My son's engaged. That's not a crime. She's using him." Ray raised a brow. "Go on." Walter laid it out piece by piece. Chloe's words at dinner, Diane's smug approval, the way Ethan looked away, the address book, the gala invitation, the web he was beginning to spin. Ray listened, no interruptions, just slow sips from his rye. When Walter finished, Ray leaned back. "You sure about the trust fund angle?" "Pretty sure. Diane's house has a second mortgage. I checked the public records last night." Ray whistled. "She's playing high-stakes bluff, huh?" Walter nodded. "And Chloe's the wild card." Ray tapped his glass. "You want information or you want exposure?" "Information, but discreet. I don't want to blow this up. I want to be precise." Ray studied him. "You've still got the touch." Walter looked down at his hands. "They may be older, but they remember." Ray slid a card across the table. "Call this guy. He owes me. He's good at finding what people wish they'd buried." Walter took it, reading the name. No fanfare. Just quiet competency. His style. "I appreciate it," Walter said. Ray leaned in. "What's your end game here, Walt?" Walter looked out the window. The gray sky hung low over the water, a boat cutting a lazy path across the surface. "I don't want revenge," he said softly. "I want Ethan to see me, really see me." Ray nodded slowly. "Then hit them where it counts, their illusion." They finished lunch without another word on the matter. Back home, Walter walked through the front door, shrugging off his jacket, the card now in his wallet. The house smelled of cinnamon and books. He stepped into his study, placed the business card beside Maggie's photo, and picked up the address book once more. The next step was clear. He would make the call, and the pieces would begin to fall into place. The envelope sat on Walter's desk like a quiet threat. No return address, just Diane Burns's name printed in crisp black lettering across the front. He'd printed it himself on thick ivory cardstock, the kind used for wedding invitations or charitable galas. It looked official, trustworthy, elegant, a wolf in tailored clothing. He sealed it with a small gold sticker embossed with a fake foundation name, the Horizon Trust Initiative. Sounded lofty, sounded expensive. Diane would eat it up. He slipped it into the mailbox before noon. No cameras, no witnesses. The trap was set. Later that afternoon, Walter sat in a corner booth at Briarbean Cafe, a quiet neighborhood spot tucked between a used bookstore and a florist shop in Fremont. A jazz trio played softly over the speakers, and the scent of cinnamon lattes filled the air. Carol Jenkins slid into the seat across from him, a to-go cup in hand and a messenger bag slung over her shoulder. She looked tired, but sharp. Her salt and pepper hair was pulled back in a loose knot, and her eyes were alert behind narrow glasses. "You look like you're plotting something," she said, stirring her drink. "I am," Walter replied. Carol raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" He smiled. "Not unless you're planning on betraying my son." She snorted softly. No danger there. They had met years ago through Maggie, who had once called Carol The only person I trust with a secret and a spreadsheet. Carol had been Maggie's partner in the early days of the Dean Family Fund, before it went dormant after Maggie's illness. They hadn't spoken much since the funeral, but when Walter called, she'd answered on the first ring. Walter slid a manila folder across the table. Background on Chloe and Diane, public records, financials, you'll want to skim it. Carol opened the folder and whistled. Second mortgage, credit card lawsuits, 2 shell LLCs in Delaware. Damn, you've been busy. I need more, Walter said. I need proof, not just suspicion. Carol nodded slowly. And you want me to get it? I need someone Chloe won't suspect. Someone who can ask the right questions, act like they're offering her an opportunity. Carol leaned back. You want me to play bait? You've done harder. She tapped her fingers on her cup, considering. What's the pitch? A new investment fund. Quiet, private. You represent a firm interested in targeting emerging wealth, young professionals with access to trust funds. Carol gave a slow grin. Nice. She'll bite. She wants to feel chosen, special. Carol took another sip. I'll need a burner phone, an alias, and a fake LinkedIn page. Walter slid another envelope across the table. Carol blinked. You already set it up? He shrugged. I had time. She laughed. A real one this time. Maggie would have loved this. Walter's smile faded, but his eyes were warm. She would have let it. Carol stood, gathering the folder. Give me 3 days. I'll find the crack. Back at the Burns house, Diane was peeling back the gold sticker on the envelope with a manicured nail. She read the letter once, then again, then let out a delighted laugh. Chloe looked up from her phone. What? This, Diane waved the letter like a trophy, is an invitation to speak at a gala, Horizon Trust Initiative, Wealth and Philanthropy. They're hosting it at the Fairmont. Chloe's eyebrows rose. Why you? Because they know refinement when they see it, Diane said smugly, and they're looking for legacy families with experience in managing intergenerational funds. Chloe reached for the letter, scanning it quickly. Fairmont's classy. What's the deal? They want me to speak about responsible transitions, how we manage your trust. Chloe's eyes narrowed. You think it's legit? It looks very legit, Diane said, already mentally assembling an outfit. This is the kind of thing that gets us back into the right rooms. Chloe nodded slowly. Might be good for Ethan, too. They're looking for new blood. Diane's eyes gleamed. Exactly. 3 days later, Chloe sat across from Carol Jenkins, now going by the name Emma Green, in a sleek downtown cafe near Pike Place. Carol wore a navy blazer, her hair straightened and tucked behind her ears, a discreet gold brooch on her lapel. She looked every bit the wealth manager. I represent a boutique firm based out of Portland, Carol said smoothly. We're looking for young professionals with significant under-leveraged assets, trust funds, inheritance, long-term potential. Chloe smiled slowly. I might fit that description. Carol sipped her espresso. We don't advertise. We work by referral only. I was given your name by a mutual contact, someone who thinks you have the kind of foresight we're interested in. Chloe leaned in, her voice lowering. What do you need from me? An initial conversation, nothing binding, just an overview of your current structure, discreet, of course. Chloe glanced around the cafe. My fiancé has a trust. From his mother's estate, large, quiet, his father's kind of checked out. Carol's fingers didn't pause. And Ethan manages it? Chloe laughed. No, he doesn't even check the balances. I handle the paperwork, pay the property taxes. He signs where I tell him. Carol nodded slowly. Good. Initiative is what we like to see. Chloe leaned back, satisfied. What's next? Carol reached into her bag and slid over a sleek black folder. You'll find a basic profile form, no sensitive data yet, just a picture of the waters, so to speak. Chloe picked it up, eyes gleaming. The recorder inside Carol's blazer clicked softly as it captured every word. That night, Walter sat in his study, Carol's voice coming through his laptop speakers. He listened as Chloe outlined the trust, how she filtered documents, how Ethan was sweet but oblivious. He didn't flinch. He didn't rage. He simply sat, silent, as the weight of it settled around him. After the recording ended, Carol's text came through. "It's done. You were right. She's dirty." Walter looked at Maggie's photo on his desk. "I'm sorry it took this long," he whispered, "but I'm not late." He reached for the next envelope. Diane's gala was days away, and now she would walk into it carrying everything she thought made her powerful, not knowing she was walking straight into the fire. The Rainier Grand Ballroom shimmered under chandeliers older than the building itself. Crystal danced in the soft light, and the walls hummed with quiet conversation, the kind held between people who'd practiced smiling for the camera and for each other. The Fairmont's event staff moved like ghosts, discreet, polished, invisible. Walter stood near the far wall, partially obscured behind a column draped in white fabric and ivy. He wore a charcoal suit, tailored but unflashy, and held a glass of sparkling water he had no intention of drinking. His eyes, calm and unreadable, tracked Diane Burns as she made her entrance. She was radiant, or at least she wanted to be. Her hair was swept up in a dramatic bun, her emerald dress hugged every calculated curve, and diamonds winked from her ears. Chloe walked a step behind, phone in hand, snapping casual photos she'd later filter and post. Walter could see it all, the performance, the hunger. He checked his watch, 20 minutes until the keynote address. Diane had no idea her name wasn't on the official program. Across the ballroom, Carol moved through this crowd like she belonged there, blending in with quiet confidence. She gave Walter a subtle nod as she passed by a dessert table. Ethan arrived 15 minutes later, alone. He looked unsure of himself, uncomfortable in the tux that didn't quite fit right. He scanned the room until he spotted Chloe, and his face softened with a kind of eager relief Walter hadn't seen in years. It made his stomach turn. Diane floated from circle to circle, smiling, kissing cheeks, tossing back compliments like confetti. She looked unstoppable, unbothered. Then the MC took the mic. The room dimmed slightly, and a soft piano loop played as the voice welcomed guests, thanked sponsors, and transitioned to the evening's main event. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker." A pause. Walter didn't move. Dr. Robert Klein, founder of the Cascade Education Trust. Diane's smile froze. The applause rolled in politely as a short, balding man in a navy suit took the stage. Walter watched as Diane leaned over to Chloe, whispering urgently. Chloe shook her head. The speech began. Something about community, about legacy. Walter didn't hear a word. Diane backed away from her table, clutching her clutch. She stalked over to the side of the stage, her heels clicking with rising volume. She flagged down a staff member and held up her letter. Walter could imagine her voice. "There's been a mistake." The staff member, young and frazzled, checked the clipboard, then shook her head, politely, firmly. Walter watched as Diane's shoulders stiffened. She turned, her expression carefully neutral, and walked briskly out of the ballroom. Chloe followed a few steps behind, her lips tight. Walter followed. He caught up with them in the side corridor near the coat check. "What a surprise," he said, voice calm. Diane turned, startled. "You." "Me," Walter confirmed. "You had something to do with this." Her voice was still controlled, but the heat beneath it cracked. Walter tilted his head. "With what, exactly?" "You know what." She stepped closer. "That letter, the invitation." He looked at Chloe. "I hear you've been exploring investment opportunities." Chloe's face paled slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said quickly. Walter reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. He held it out between two fingers. "Then this should be of no concern." Neither woman moved. He tucked it back in his pocket. Diane recovered first. "You think this makes you clever? You think humiliating me in public will, what, win Ethan back? Erase the fact that you disappeared for years?" Walter's voice didn't rise. "I didn't disappear. I stepped back." Chloe scoffed. "Same thing." "No," Walter said. "Disappearing is cowardice. Stepping back is sacrifice. And I did it for Ethan, for Maggie, for the family you've tried to rewrite." Diane's jaw tightened. "You think you're righteous, but all you've done is stir a mess." Walter looked past them, down the corridor, where Ethan now stood, still, uncertain, having heard enough. Chloe turned, caught sight of him, and quickly said, "Ethan, it's not what it looks like." He didn't respond. Walter met his eyes. Ethan looked like he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. Chloe stepped forward, reaching for him. "It's just business. Your dad twisted it. I was trying to help us." Walter didn't move. He let the silence speak. Finally, Ethan spoke, voice low. "I'll call a car." Chloe froze. Ethan looked at Walter, then turned and walked away. The silence in the hallway was thicker than the music that still played faintly from the ballroom. Diane exhaled, long and slow. "You've made your point." "No," Walter said. "I haven't." He stepped closer, his tone unwavering. "The next time you speak about me in that house, remember this moment. You're not invisible, Diane. You're just not nearly as clever as you think." He left them there. Outside, the night was cool, the Seattle air sharp with salt and spring. Walter didn't feel triumphant, not exactly, but he felt seen. He walked toward the curb, his breath visible in the air. As he reached for his keys, he heard footsteps behind him. "Ethan." Walter turned slowly. "I didn't know," Ethan said. "I know," Walter replied. Ethan looked down. "Chloe, she..." Walter cut in gently. "She made choices. So did you." A long pause. Ethan nodded. "Can we talk? Not here, but soon." Walter placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "I'd like that." Ethan nodded again, then turned and walked toward his car. Walter looked up at the night sky and following the stars fighting through the city glow. The storm had passed, but something better was on the horizon. The flash drive sat on Ethan's desk like it didn't belong there. It was small, plain, and silent, yet impossibly heavy. Carol had slipped it into his hand that morning with a look that said, "You'll want to sit down when you hear it." He hadn't listened to it at work. He hadn't wanted to believe. Now, in his quiet apartment overlooking Lake Union, he sat in his home office, headphones on, watching the progress bar crawl across his laptop screen as Chloe's voice filled his ears. "I handle the paperwork. Ethan doesn't even check it. He signs where I tell him." A soft laugh. "He's sweet. And so easy." The audio was clean, crisp, a conversation Chloe had with a woman named Emma, except now he knew that wasn't her name. He didn't know who she really was, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that Chloe had said those things, about him, to a stranger. He sat very still. Some part of him wanted to rip the headphones off. Another part made him listen to every second. At the end of the file, there was a soft click, then silence. Ethan pulled the headphones down, staring at nothing. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just sat there. The weight of it all, the months, maybe years of subtle manipulation, crashed down on him like cold water. He remembered the forms she'd asked him to sign just for taxes. The way she always spoke to Diane in half sentences he wasn't meant to follow. How she laughed when he hesitated, saying, "Babe, I've got this." He thought she was protecting him. She was cornering him. The door opened behind him. "Hey," Chloe said, kicking off her shoes. "You wouldn't believe the traffic." She froze when she saw the flash drive in his hand. "What's that?" Ethan stood, slow and quiet. Chloe's smile faltered. "E?" "Sit down," he said. Her eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because I don't want to raise my voice." She crossed her arms. "You're scaring me." Ethan held up the drive. "I heard everything. Every word you said to that woman, about me, about the trust." Chloe went still. "Who was she?" Ethan asked. Chloe didn't answer. Ethan nodded to himself. "I thought I was paranoid, but it was all true." Chloe took a step forward. "Ethan, look, whatever you think you heard..." "Don't," he said. "Don't insult me more by pretending." Chloe's voice sharpened. "So what, your dad spies on me, and now I'm the villain?" Ethan blinked. "My dad didn't say a word. He let the truth speak for itself." Chloe hesitated. "I was trying to help us. Do you think your dad ever really respected you? He abandoned you. I'm the one who kept this house running, who kept your life from falling apart." "No," Ethan said, voice quiet but clear. "You used me." She stared at him. "So what? You're breaking up with me over one stupid recording?" Ethan shook his head. I'm breaking up with you because I finally see you. He walked past her to the door and opened it. You should go. Chloe stared at him for a long time, something between fury and disbelief playing across her face. Then she grabbed her purse and walked out. Ethan closed the door behind her and leaned against it, exhaling like he'd been holding his breath for years. That night, it rained. Not a storm, just a slow, steady drizzle tapping against the windows. Ethan stared out into the wet street, coffee cooling beside him, when he saw the headlights, a familiar car. He opened the door before Walter could knock. They stood there for a second, two grown men with too much unsaid between them. Then Ethan stepped back. Walter entered quietly, removing his coat and setting it on the hook near the door. The silence was comfortable this time, not heavy. Ethan poured them both coffee. They sat at the kitchen table, same side, shoulders slightly turned toward one another. I listened to it, Ethan said. Walter nodded. Thank you, Ethan added. Walter's voice was low. You deserve to know. I should have seen it sooner, Ethan said, ashamed. No, Walter said. She was good at hiding. Ethan looked at his hands. Why didn't you tell me all this sooner, about her, about everything? Walter took a breath. Because I didn't want to push you away. And maybe because I was scared you'd see me the way they did. Ethan blinked. As what? Walter met his eyes. As a man who gave up. Ethan didn't look away. You didn't. Walter smiled faintly. Took you long enough to say that. They both chuckled, the tension cracking just a little. Ethan looked around the apartment. I've been thinking about Mom, about the trust, about everything. Walter waited. I want to do something with it, something real, not just sit on it or let it rot. Walter nodded slowly. There's an office, used to be Maggie's. It's been locked up for years. Ethan smiled. Want to unlock it together? Walter's chest ached in a good way. Yeah, I'd like that. The next day, Diane showed up unannounced. She stood on Walter's front porch in a crisp coat, her lipstick perfect, but her eyes weary. He didn't invite her in. I thought I'd find you at Ethan's, she said. I left him space. She shifted her bag on her shoulder. You win, Walter. Is that what you want to hear? I didn't do this to win. Then why? Walter's voice was steady. Because someone had to say enough. Diane exhaled sharply. You've always thought you were better than me. Walter studied her. No, I just stopped pretending I was worse. She looked away. Whatever grudge you have against me, she said, don't take it out on Ethan. He's innocent. I know, Walter said. That's why I protected him. Diane's voice dropped. We both loved him. Walter nodded. Just differently. She hesitated. Do you ever wonder what might have happened if we'd met under other circumstances? No, Walter said simply. Because I wouldn't change 1 second with Maggie, not even the hard ones. Diane didn't respond. Walter let the silence stretch. You should go, he said finally. Diane nodded, turned, and walked down the steps. She didn't look back. Walter closed the door and leaned against it, a sense of closure settling into his bones. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man living in the past. He felt like someone walking back into his own story. The key was warm in Walter's palm, though it hadn't been touched in over a decade. Brass, simple, still tagged with a faded label, Maggie's office. The handwriting was hers, elegant, slightly tilted, the loop on the G curling back like a ribbon. He stood outside the door on the second floor of the old brick building in Ballard. The paint had faded and the wood trim needed work, but the bones were strong. Maggie had always said that about buildings and people. Good bones last. You just have to clean out the rot. He slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click. The office was exactly as she'd left it. Dust covered the furniture like a thin film of time. The desk still held her notebooks, and on the wall, the framed quote she loved. Leave people better than you found them. Ethan stood beside him, quiet. Walter stepped in first, letting the air hit him. It smelled like old paper, lavender, and memory. Feels like she's still here, Ethan said. She is, Walter replied. They worked for hours, dusting, organizing, letting in fresh air. Carol arrived around noon with boxes of supplies, pastries, and a big thermal jug of black coffee. "This place needs new paint," she said, setting down a roller. "And a new name," Ethan added. Walter looked at him. "You don't want to keep hers?" Ethan hesitated. "I want her in it, but I want it to be ours now." Walter nodded slowly. "How about Maggie House?" "Not an office, a home base." Carol smiled. "Sounds like a non-profit already." They laughed, gently, together, the kind of laugh that comes after rain. The next few days passed in a rhythm that felt almost sacred. They painted walls, replaced light bulbs, built a new front desk. Walter moved slowly but deliberately, his hands remembering how to hold tools, how to shape something from nothing. Ethan handled the legal side, filings, paperwork, nonprofit status. Carol pulled strings, made calls, brought in her quiet network of helpers. They didn't argue. They didn't need to. One morning, Ethan arrived early. Walter was already there, watering a small potted fern by the window. Ethan held out 2 coffees. "One cream, no sugar. Still your style?" Walter smiled. "Still." They sat together, looking out at the street below. "Thanks for not giving up on me," Ethan said. Walter didn't answer right away. "I didn't know how to reach you," he said eventually. "And I figured, if I waited long enough, you might come find me. But you didn't." Ethan nodded. "I think I was angry." "I know. But not really at you. I know that too." They sat in silence for a while. Then Walter asked, "Do you remember the day we buried her?" Ethan closed his eyes. "Yeah. You didn't cry." "I couldn't. I thought maybe I did something wrong." Ethan looked at him. "You didn't. I didn't want to cry in front of Diane, or Chloe, or everyone who looked like they were there to judge." Walter's throat tightened. "You were always stronger than I gave you credit for." Ethan turned to him. "No, I was just quieter than you knew." They both smiled. Later that day, Walter went alone to the cemetery. He brought a small bouquet of daisies, Maggie's favorite. He knelt in front of the gravestone, brushing off a few fallen leaves. "Hey, Mags," he said quietly. "We're reopening the office with Ethan and Carol. It's a mess right now, but it's a good mess." He ran a hand over the cool stone. "I wish you could see him. He's finding his way back, and maybe I am too." He sat for a while, letting the wind pass over him, letting the quiet speak. That evening, he and Carol sat at the park bench near Green Lake, an old tradition Maggie had started. Carol handed him a notebook. "What's this?" "First donor list," she said. 3 families already pledged $5,000 each." Walter blinked. "We haven't even opened." "Word spreads," Carol said, "and people remember Maggie." They watched as kids ran past, parents pushed strollers, and a group of teenagers threw a frisbee nearby. Walter leaned back. "You think this will last?" Carol glanced at him. "If we keep showing up, yeah." He nodded. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't ask for more. Then Carol said, softly, "You ever think about starting over? Like, not just with work?" Walter turned to her. She shrugged. "We're not young, Walter, but we're not done either." He didn't smile, but his eyes were kind. "I'm not looking for another Maggie," he said, "but maybe I'm ready to stop being alone." Carol reached over, placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "Not alone anymore," she said. They stayed until the sky turned soft pink and the streetlights began to flicker on. Back at Maggie House, the door now bore a hand-painted sign, "Leave people better." The space wasn't perfect yet, but neither were they, and that, Walter thought, was exactly the point.